Hi everyone, I'm Lara Rab and I'm the owner operator of Heavy Eyes Happy Heart Sleep Consulting in Vancouver, and I am a certified sleep consultant who works with infants and toddlers primarily, and I'm also a mom to one very vivacious and spirited 2.5-year-old girl. So I wanted to start this segment, this Ask Anything segment, just to help moms out and create a little bit more engagement on my Facebook page, and just, give people some courage to ask questions, since I know sometimes it's really hard to ask that first question and really hard to, put yourself out there and admit that you might need a little bit of help, which I think we all need a little bit of help now and then. So it's great to sometimes reach out when you need it. So this week I received a number of questions, which was really great for me. And I'd like you to know that if you did send in a question, I did send you a response, just, pointing you in the right direction, perhaps to answer your question yourself. If I don't get a chance to answer it this week for you, I may also get a chance to sorry, no fancy camera work here, to answer for you on a following Friday. So this week's question comes from Carrie, and she said, I love the Friday Ask Anything idea. How about, what are the alternatives to crying it out? Do they work? I'm sure it's situation dependent, so could you maybe give an example? Baby A with this issue, comparing how cry it out would work compared to other approaches. So thank you, Carrie, for your question. I think it's a really great question. I think a lot of families have this question and they sort of don't know where to begin. I think it's really important with any sleep training that's going to take place for us to just define what cry it out is. And so I think every person might have a slightly different definition. For me, I look at either a Ferber method of sleep training, such as controlled crying or gradual extinction, where a baby is left to cry for a set period of time as determined by the parents, and then they return to check on the baby and console. Some people even call that check and console, and make sure that everything's okay, and then they leave again, and repeat this until the baby falls asleep. So there can be different periods set depending on a baby's age and what the parents are comfortable with, but usually there's a set number of time. Maybe it's 5 minutes. Later on it might extend to 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or sometimes people extend these intervals with the different passing nights. So I would consider that a cried out approach, because the baby is being left to cry on their own. Another cried out approach, I would say, is that from Wise Bluth, which is extinction. So some people might use a full-on extinction method with their child, which would mean putting them to sleep and allowing them to cry as long as it takes until they fall asleep or return to sleep, and not returning again until the child is asleep or until the next morning, which is pretty extreme, I think. I've never met anyone who has admitted to using that method yet. I will say that I don't use controlled crying very often with families at all, but that really is because I want my families to choose the approach that they feel best suits them and their parenting philosophy after being presented with a number of different options. And I would say that the majority of families that come to me are just looking for a different approach from that, and are feeling like they're going to be more consistent and able to better carry through with a different approach. And so I will say that I certainly don't pass any judgment on either of those methods. We used the Ferber method with our own daughter, and at the time of making that decision, I really didn't feel like I had enough knowledge to choose an alternative, and I do feel like it made me a better mama, to be much better rested. And, I did it for my own sanity. And I will, I'll admit that to anyone. And I don't regret that decision. But I do wish that I was maybe given some alternatives to consider in teaching my daughter how to sleep independently. So now we're going to get to Carrie's question. So she asked, what are some alternatives to Cried Out, and do they work? Now, of course, I think the first thing to look at before starting any approach is just making sure that all foundations are in place so that you're setting your child up for the most sleep success. So you're using, the most optimal sleep environment that you possibly can. All of the times of day that your child is sleeping at are the most optimal for their body, and allow them to achieve sleep the most easily. And therefore, hopefully, once all those foundations are in place, you're really cutting down on the amount of crying that you will see. So there are a lot of different alternatives. Quite a few families come to me after reading Elizabeth Pantley's book, The No Cry Sleep Solution. And I would say that majority of them would not come to me if they felt that they had had success with those methods. I find that the methods primarily mentioned in her book, such as pick up, put down, where you pick your baby up when they're crying and then you put them back down as soon as they're calm, and you repeat that until they fall asleep. That method is very stimulating for most babies and works generally for a much younger crowd, so more of a strategy to use from birth rather than initiating it much later on, where most people start to initiate it around the 4-month mark. And at that point, it's usually frustrating and overly stimulating for most babies, especially dependent on temperament. So I always look at a child's temperament before deciding on the best course of action for their sleep. And that's something I would certainly not consider for a spirited baby or, just a child who might have a more complex temperament. Okay. So with that said, there are some techniques that I find to be very useful, and I think that they can actually be as successful as Cried Out, as any Cried Out approach. And sometimes I find that they are actually faster. And I think it comes down to consistency. So consistency, of course, is the most important thing. And I think what allows many parents to be successful with using Cried Out or, controlled crying, gradual extinction approach is that they are able to carry it out with 100% consistency. They have a timer, they have a set check-in time, the baby comes to predict what's happening next, and parents feel confident in carrying that out. They know that there is an end in sight, and they feel empowered in making that approach. So I would say that the same thing is equally important for an alternative to crying it out. So something that I do use quite often is probably known as gradual retreat. So if that interests you, you can always look up those words and see what's entailed there. But basically, you are meeting your child where they're at. So if right now that means co-sleeping or staying with your child until they fall asleep or rocking them to sleep, and you're working to basically gradually move yourself away, offering less and less parental support with helping your child to sleep with each passing night. So with that particular approach, I never really encourage parents to leave their child to cry. They are there to experience that crying and offer emotional support and some physical support as well throughout the process. And I use that often, very, very often with families with great success. Awesome changes happen. So if you're looking for something that works well, I would definitely suggest gradual retreat. Some people call it camping out. Some people call it SLS, which is Kim West, her Gentle Guide to Sleep, the Sleep Lady Shuffle, basically. So there's all these different names for similar techniques, but I do find that works very well. And I have some notes here because, I didn't want to have to retake this a million times, and I didn't want it to be 30 minutes long. I could easily talk about this for like 30 minutes. Anyways, so another technique that you can use is really just paying close attention to what your child's sleep associations are. So there are some things that your child will associate with going to sleep, and some which you would feel are probably more negative, and some that you feel are probably more positive in helping your child achieve that sleep. So positive sleep associations include like a really good bedtime routine, predictability and scheduling, knowing what's going to happen next. Sometimes an infant will associate their sleep sack with going to sleep. An infant might associate a particular book, a particular song, and those are really healthy sleep associations because they help the child know what's coming next, and they also are helpful cues that sleep is coming, and they're not that difficult for parents to carry out. So I would consider those to be kind of healthy sleep associations, or positive sleep associations. And then there might be sleep associations that started off in a positive way but have kind of become negative over time. And an example of that might be rocking. So rocking your baby to sleep. So while that might have started out really awesome for you and something that you love to do and something that you look forward to every night because you're holding your baby to sleep and you're really enjoying their company, it might become negative to you when they weigh 27 pounds and the rocking has actually become excessive bouncing while holding your child for over an hour. So something that used to take for 10 or 15 minutes maybe now takes an hour and a half. And parents have decided that that is now a negative association for them. So what I would suggest in those kind of cases is looking at when your child usually falls asleep and tracking that for a few days. Beginning with looking at nighttime where the drive to sleep is really high, and then working to lessen that association over time. So in my example that I used, I would envision someone rocking their baby really vigorously, and for such a long period of time. So something that they could do to lessen that association would be rocking a little bit less vigorously with each passing night, and also rocking for less time with each passing night, working themselves up to a point where they are just holding their baby to sleep. Now, this is something, so I mentioned that, Carrie asked in her question, do they work? Do these alternatives to crying it out work? Yes, they do. They do work. Otherwise, I wouldn't do them because I wouldn't have any families coming to me. But that said, lessening sleep associations really is child dependent. Sometimes that can go really, really well, but you have to remember that, if you're working with a child who's 10 months old, and this is the way that they've known how to fall asleep for 10 months, you cannot expect to undo that in a week's time. It's just an unrealistic expectation. So, it took you 10 months to teach your child this method to fall asleep. So expect it to take some time, not 10 months, but some time to teach them an alternative way to fall asleep. So, yeah, that certainly does work, but sometimes people can feel like that is taking a really long time. But if they feel confident, then, and that's the right decision for their family, then that's something that's really great. And I think it's really important to value that. So I'm just going to look over my notes here and see if I've forgotten anything that I wanted to mention. Yeah, of course, and another alternative approach would be safe bed sharing or co-sleeping. And, some families really, really do enjoy that approach. And I have no judgment based on that as well. As if you're doing it safely and you're happy, good for you. Like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But what I can do for you, if you are ready to make changes, is really support you. So although you can Google these methods and you can read about them, at the end of the day, I have read 22 different sleep books, and I'm not tired. So what I can do is really help you when you're in a sleep-deprived state. So I can be a constant voice for you in holding you accountable, in helping you make changes that you feel empowered about. So I can really empower you and give you the knowledge that what you're doing for your family is the right thing at this particular time. And you know, when things do go wrong, as they do, you know, babies are ever changing. They're certainly not robots, and neither are you. So, you know, when troubles do arise, I can help you to troubleshoot them, overcome difficult times, especially if there's difficult things happening in the family. So it's really important for me. I always look at taking a holistic approach to sleep and looking at all aspects of the family. So, you know, the parent-child relationship is very important, but the parent-parent relationship is very important. The grandparent-child relationship is even important if they're a caregiver, right? So we can't negate how much those things and that connection between everyone really can dictate sleep and really can change what is flowing nicely in the home at that particular time. So if that is support that you're looking for, feel free to shoot me an email or just send me some questions to tackle for next week. But Carrie, I hope I answered your question to your satisfaction and gave you some ideas for alternatives to try. But like I said, really, whatever choice you've made, if it's making you a happy and confident parent, then kudos to you, because that is number one. Healthy parent, healthy child. Happy parent, happy child. So, yeah, thanks for listening. Bye.